All right, so it's 2 minutes after the hour, so we're gonna move forward and get going here because we've got a lot of great content to share with you this afternoon or this morning or this evening, depending on where you are dialing into this live from. We're excited to have you join us here for the webinar, Make Culture Work, from Vague Concept to Tangible Tool in 5 Steps. So Cynthia, my business partner here at Culture Talk, and I are happy to be sharing these principles with you, ways that we have found to make culture a tangible business asset. And we'd like to start off by thanking Courtney Cawthon from Articulate, Real and Clear, who has graciously agreed to support our webinar this morning. So she will be working with you in the chat to get any questions out on the table and get feedback and also get your responses to a poll that we're going to play on a little quiz we're going to have for you as part of our conversation this morning. So let's go ahead and get into the topic here. Moving forward, Cynthia, next slide. Okay, so open any website or any publication today across multiple industries, and these are the kind of headlines that you'll see. We're looking at, why is 2022 the year of workplace culture? Company culture is everyone's responsibility, and a big one from LinkedIn, who did their entire global talent trends report this year and then entitled it The Reinvention of Company Culture. In fact, the CEO of LinkedIn had this to say about it: business leaders are rethinking their entire working models, cultures, and company values. And employees are rethinking not just how they work, but why. So it's really clear that workplaces are changing. And I think it's also clear that there are 3 things that have put culture on center stage. You might be experiencing some of these challenges in your work environment or for your clients. The first thing is a talent shortage, which was underway already, but really amplified by the pandemic. So anyone who's working in recruiting and onboarding and in the HR space, you're already working with some of these challenges, including the new challenge of hiring people remotely without ever meeting them, and then trying to bring them on to remote or hybrid teams. Social justice is also taking center stage with diversity, equity, and inclusion conversations, ESG. These are the kind of things that companies can no longer sit on the sidelines because stakeholders across the entire spectrum are expecting them to have a position and to share that position and to be transparent and to take a stand. And then those shifting workplace paradigms and employee expectations, obviously definitely accelerated by the pandemic, but those demands are continuing to grow. And because of them, look back at bullet number 1, because of them, we now have a talent shortage. So CEOs are really clear that culture is something that needs to be addressed in their organizations, and they're waking up and they're saying so, and they're really driving more dollars, more budget to the line item that is workplace culture. But it can be really difficult to talk about unless you have a way to make it tangible. It can be the company's biggest asset or a huge liability. So just checking the culture box and saying, yeah, we did that, isn't enough. And one of the biggest reasons is because it's really challenging to define your culture. Just like the fish swimming around in the water here, it can be very hard to understand what it is because you're swimming in it every day and you can't really see it. So I got to ask, where have we encountered a problem like this before? I think we have solved some of these intangibility problems. So Cynthia's going to share with us another intangible business element that we've solved before.
Right. So money. Let's consider money. I think you'd agree that money is considered very foundational to business, and how you handle money is very important. And actually, the definition of money is really anything that is commonly accepted by a group of people to be in exchange for goods, services, and resources. And over time, we've gone from commodities to coins to cash, and now even to crypto. I find it surprising, Teresa, that it was only 1862 when the US created our current system of cash.
Yeah,
So,
I always find that interesting too.
right? So not so long ago in the scheme of things, and we certainly, I think, as business people, we all understand how our products, our services, the things that we offer relate to financial outcomes, right? We have to be making money. We say things about money like, oh, we just have to get our arms around our finances. We have to work out our finances. But in reality, just pause for a moment and realize that it's all conceptual. It's intangible. There is nothing really there. And yet money has become a tangible tool in business because we have complex agreements around it. We've made it tangible because the meaning and the value that we assign to financial transactions and metrics that we have about money. So what I'd like to do is just walk us through kind of 5 key things that we've done to money to turn it into a tangible tool. First, we frame it. I just went through, we had, cows and then currencies. Today we have cash, and we have cash in all kinds of varieties. We have conversion rates if we're going to, trade money with people, fiscal years around which we think about money. We have accounting methods. And so we have a commonly agreed framework for how to think about money. The second thing we did to make it tangible is we found ways to measure it. So, we have to be able to slice it and dice it. We have to be able to create meaning around using that. We have to look at it from different perspectives. We have to be able to visualize the money. The third thing we learned how to do was how to scale it. And we're really good at this, right? How much of business is around scaling our financial success? We set revenue goals, create benchmarks. We're always on the lookout for how to quickly and productively scale the financial outcomes of a particular business. But once we've scaled it, we then have to start, we've grown to a particular size, we've earned a particular amount of money, and now we have to think about how do we sustain our growth? What are we going to do to keep it going? How are we going to create and maintain maybe some of the optimal things that are working for us? How do we guard against different threats that allow us to keep our money and continue to grow it? And the fifth step is share it. Now we've, created something of value. We have a business of value. We have employees that are part of creating that. We have stockholders, potentially investors. We have our customers. And so there's all different kinds of ways that we actually share the money that we've made. So 5 steps to making money tangible. Before Teresa and I were working on Culture Talk, we worked in a business called Allegory Studios. And Allegory Studios, our sweet spot client was actually helping companies brand themselves. And that was a large, complicated project. And it's kind of interesting when you think about money becoming tangible. That's kind of a hard concept. And branding is sort of similar. It's a conceptual thing that we have to make tangible. And the way that we would go about branding in Allegory Studios is we would go in and we would measure the culture. We're going to share a little bit about that today. But once we measured the culture, it allowed us to get in and sort of unlock the code or the DNA, the heart and soul of the company. And then we would translate that into a story that leaders could build momentum around. And we got to see firsthand how story moved people, how it engaged teams. And that's why we founded Culture Talk. We found that as that culture that we were measuring became something tangible, a story, that it could be used in the same kind of way that we're talking about with money here today. So you certainly understand how your organization's products and services relate to financial outcomes. Passing. Teresa, I'm going to pass to you.
Okay. All right. So just like money, culture impacts every aspect of our business. And if we had a magical culture cube, kind of think about a Rubik's Cube, and we could really solve some of the challenges that this puzzle presents to us in our organization, what are some of the things that culture could help us to solve for? So let's take a look at them. The first one is mergers and acquisitions. Now, we know that this is a really big growth strategy for many different organizations, and that the M&A volume right now, deals are at an all-time high. But the other statistic that's important to know is that up to 80% of mergers never achieve the financial success that they were going after in coming together in this deal. And a huge percentage of those fail because of the inability to bring cultures together. So integrating culture through merger is one way that understanding culture can really help you. The second one is culture change. All kinds of reasons why we might need to shift the culture, change the direction, whether it's a technology change, a pandemic impact, huge disruption in your marketplace, all kinds of reasons why we need to understand what is our point A and where do we need to go? Will the current culture give us what we need in order to get there? The third area is brand and purpose. That's where we came in. Cynthia just shared with you about Allegory Studios and the way that we used culture in our brand processes. And that can also really be driven to the question of purpose. Now, more than ever, we're being asked to articulate what is your purpose for being in business, and understanding your culture is really important to informing the answer to that purpose question, as well as employment brand. That, there's two sides of the coin when it comes to branding, and the employment brand and the experience created for employees today is just as important as the external brand for customers. Which brings me to recruiting and retention. When you have a strong employment brand, you can jump off of that for authentic messages that will really attract and retain people and help them to understand why they belong here, and how to feel good about being a part of our team and aligned with our purpose. The next area is leadership, team development. And one of today's real hot topics, diversity, equity, and inclusion. When we can really get clear that an organization is made up of people, and those groups are just collections of individuals, and that how they are being developed, how they feel about being part of this culture is a huge driver of the organization's success. And you can't extract them one from the other. You really need to take them as a part of the same whole. And then finally, reputation and crisis management. When something does go wrong, your culture can be your biggest asset to overcome the challenges, or a huge liability that really holds you back. So if you can have a tangible culture, something that can be used as an asset when a reputation or crisis management situation shows up, that's a really important tool to have in your toolkit. So let's take a look at how we can use these same steps that we just talked about for money and use them to help us get a handle on our culture.
Right. So as we learned with money, the first step to making something tangible is to frame it. And what we found is that many organizations and leaders, they lack a system and a language to lead meaningful conversation about culture that builds understanding and consensus around important issues. So the first thing we need to do is define our culture currency, a common language that the whole team can adopt. A culture framework should help you identify and understand relevant points of view from different perspectives. This is the foundation, and you'll build your culture from there using a tool to evaluate the alignment of existing programs and new ideas. So, before we tell you about our framework, we want to share a scenario and get you in on the fun. So I'm going to read a scenario, you can read along, and we want you to actually think about yourself in this situation. So your clients or your internal team is struggling with a strategy to recruit and retain people during the Great Reshuffle. As weeks turn to months, it's clear that the organizational culture and a weak employment brand are part of the problem, and things will not bounce back to normal anytime soon. The interaction between employees feels stifled with new remote work and hybrid protocols, making it difficult to connect, communicate, and collaborate like before. Okay, if you put yourself in that, here's the question. We want you to write down the leadership would probably try to solve the problem with this mindset. We're going to give you some multiple choice options. There's going to be 12 multiple choice options, and just know that as we go through them, we want you to write down if something sounds like that could be true for you, write down that scenario or the letter of that scenario, and then we'll come back to all 12 at the end so you can pick your final answer. Okay? A, be optimistic and keep the faith. Believe things will get better, and they will. Or is it B, work hard and collaborate. Everyone is going through the same thing. We are in this together. C, we'll power through. If everybody doubles down, nothing can stop us from accomplishing our mission. D, this is when we must take care of each other. We'll sacrifice so that others can succeed. E, this is an opportunity to embrace a new future. The possibilities are endless. F, relationships matter most. Be vulnerable and embrace emotional intelligence. G, the old way was broken. It's time for innovation. We're willing to take risks to create a better future. H, let's imagine a more beautiful workplace. We'll make order from the chaos. I, there is no doubt that we will triumph. If everyone does their job, we will succeed. Stability is what matters. J, we can easily transform this situation into a better one. Mind over matter. K, we'll follow the data and act logically. It's important that we don't rush into anything. L, we can have fun with these new ideas. We'll enjoy work and look at the fun side of change. All right.
Okay, look at all 12 options.
There are 12. So if you wrote down more than one, here's a chance to just compare them. We do want you to pick one letter from A to L. What would be the leadership mindset during this scenario we're living in right now?
It can be hard, right? Just to pick one. Sometimes you might toggle back and forth. So if you have more than one that kind of stands out, that's okay. You can pick maybe two or three if that makes it easier. Yeah. Sometimes people just land in a single one single answer. And we'll give a moment here for the live feed to catch up and see what people might have to say. And when that does, Courtney can maybe share with us some of what folks are saying in the live feed.
So should we reveal the answers before we hear from people, or do we want to shout out Courtney letters?
Yeah, I've asked for letters to be put in the chat, so we'll see.
Okay. All right. Well, I think that we can probably reveal the answers and
drum roll. And I stopped moving forward. Okay. So now take a look at your top letter or your top 2 or 3 letters and chat out to Courtney which of these stories you selected for the scenario.
I'm seeing a J in the chat, magician.
Okay.
Okay.
One J. Okay, one magician. We will keep going. So these 12 we call these 12 storylines archetypes. And this is our cultural currency. This is the framework we use. And it's one way of defining what type of culture exists in your organization. It's based on archetypes, which come to us from Carl Jung, a psychotherapist, who introduced the idea of these timeless stories and these relatable characters that everybody across, the world can connect and relate to. So you can scan the framework. Now you're seeing all 12. We had you sort of zero in on 1 or 2, but now think about the whole framework and you can almost guess, right? Like what these different storylines is about, even if it's not one you picked. We know that hero cultures, for example, might save the day. Magicians, whoever picked J, they transform things. Revolutionaries break boundaries. So looking at the list again and thinking about that, which of these might be part of your organization's culture story? A good framework, and we believe archetypes are a good framework, they provide a shortcut to understanding. They get everybody on the same page quickly. And they're not really a good or bad framework. There are no good or bad archetypes. It's not a judgmental framework. Rather, in this common language, each of these storylines has the opportunity to show up in very empowered ways or in a shadow state. So when we're looking at this framework, this again is the first step in making culture tangible. Let me share an example of how these archetypes might show up in an individual. The sage archetype. We all recognize the sages in our lives or anybody we work with who might have that type. They focus on the facts, they dive into research, and they point out all the really important details and data about why we should make particular decisions. And sometimes they do that even if we don't want them to, right? That's because the sage also has behavior patterns that show up in the shadow. They can get stuck. They can do, that analysis paralysis. And they often have a hard time relating to others, especially when it's not based on an area of expertise for them. Or let's consider a second one of these patterns and how it might show up in organizational culture. The caregiver. When this culture is expressed through strengths, we have the makings for a world-class customer experience organization. The environment creates stability and a consistency that we can trust. But organizational cultures also have shadow tendencies. And in the framework of archetypes, they're just, 2 sides of the same coin. So in the shadow, when a caregiver shows up in the shadow, perhaps giving is so valued that leaders make people dependent on them for things they should do themselves, which in turn makes them into martyrs. So, example of the framework. Step 2, just like with money, we have to measure this, right? First of all, it's impossible to measure something if you don't have a framework, but we've already got that covered in step 1. Because without a measurement system, we don't have a way of understanding the underlying cultural drivers. And that leaves us to diagnose issues on the surface, right? But we know culture goes much deeper than that. It can be a trap when you're only looking at surface sort of symptoms of culture, where you have a big celebration for winning an award, but you return to work and there's only been minimal impact around that. So we need a way to measure these underlying human motivations and drivers so that you can identify the behaviors you want to encourage and those you want to minimize. And that kind of, it brings another point about measurement up, right? Are we measuring the right things? One reason that it's hard to measure culture is because it's reflected in the unwritten rules of engagement. Even when we try to write down everything and put it into a culture code or an employee handbook, what do we expect? How do we expect people to behave in this culture? There's sort of there's a gap between what we say we expect and how things really work around here. Culture, in fact, shows up in shared values. And think about, some of the nuances in the ways that your organization handles things like career growth, professional development, preferred leadership styles, work-life balance, humor, inclusion, as Teresa mentioned earlier, social justice issues, where do they stand? Culture is also idiosyncratic, and it's woven through the very things that are most difficult to enforce, like interpersonal relationships, shared complaints, jokes that happen between teammates on tight deadlines. So that brings up the question of, can you actually measure it? One way companies attempt to quantify their cultures is through competitions like a best place to work. And the thing I would caution about these types of measurements is they often get hung up to a large degree in employee satisfaction and a list of perks and benefits, things that really don't move the needle or mold behavior. In this example, we have Amazon and Google. They may have a very similar list of perks and benefits of working for this company, but I think you'll agree they have very different cultures. So what can we do? At Culture Talk, we have two assessment tools, but we'll continue this analogy thinking about archetypes. And here are the results that an organization who took a Culture Talk culture survey, when we measured the presence of archetypes in their organization, you can see that the jester, the sage, and the explorer archetypes are predominant. To validate this kind of a profile, this kind of outcome, we then align those patterns, what we know about those stories, with the unwritten rules and the documented expectations, the stories, the history, the vision of the organization. What that allows us to do when an organization validates archetypal patterns, measures and validates them, is that we can create a very unique profile that is nuanced and one of a kind to an organization. These graphics are examples of profiles that communicate not just which 3 archetypes are at play in the culture of the organization, but also the relationship between the patterns. And as you can see, if you had, a cultural profile that looked like one of these, we're starting to get to a space where culture is becoming tangible.
Okay. So that brings us to principle number 3, or the third step, which is to scale it. So the question is how? How do you use this culture profile that Cynthia just shared with you as a tangible tool? Well, we just talked about how you've got clearly articulated cultural norms, preferences, and expectations that are all built into that unique culture profile. And you've also developed a little bit of an understanding of those shadow traits, maybe some awareness about the things that you keep bumping into as a group, as an organization, and even as individuals that kind of hold you back. And you also probably know from your background and expertise that if you measure, you use a survey of any kind to measure something, especially culture, you'd better be ready to move it forward and to activate it. So the moment you take a survey, you better be ready to share the results and to do something about it. So let's take a look at how you can activate a culture profile. All right, so here's a look at lots of different areas that are impacted by culture. And you'll see that we're sharing, you can bridge the gap if you take a look at this holistically between individuals, teams, and the organization. Looking at this whole culture profile, or this whole thought about what can culture do for you, one of the areas that really stands out is brand. That's where we came into this conversation. You could be looking at it from a perspective of organizational brand or employment brand. How much more compelling is it for employees to think about themselves as tied to your culture when they have a clear understanding of what it means to show up every day and what those expectations are? Change is another one, evolving the culture. When change is necessary, as it often is, your culture profile serves as a map. Where are we starting from? What is our point A? And how can we align new behaviors and changes that we need to make within that framework or within a strong framework so that we can make the changes, so that we're not feeling rudderless as we're asked to make important change. Merging cultures. We talked about how important it is to get the culture integration right when you're doing an M&A work. And it becomes so much more effective when you have a common language and it helps you to work through some of those obstacles. When we think about it you can go to the next one, Cynthia. When we think about it from the individual perspective, there are lots of things that can be done when an individual is aligned with your culture as well. For instance, you can integrate this thinking into every aspect of the employee life cycle, from guiding hiring decisions, getting to better conversations that are based on real human motivations and what really drives human beings, and then bringing them onto teams, resolving conflicts when those come up, and helping to lead people through a personal growth that will help them to move into transition into leadership roles as well in your organization. But let me just give you an example. I'm going to share with you one company who used this culture, its own culture profile. Let me tell you a little bit about Nussbaum Transportation. Nussbaum was looking to significantly grow its fleet of trucks. But recruiting truck drivers has been a challenge since long before the pandemic. This is an industry that has really earned its stripes in getting the recruiting challenges out. And their average turnover in recruiting truck drivers is well over 100% for many, many companies in the industry. So what we did with Nussbaum is begin by conducting a baseline culture audit. And the results of that culture audit for Nussbaum were the innocent, the hero, and the explorer archetypes. And so the Nussbaum's brand, and more importantly, in this case, their employment brand, was built on this profile. Now, here's just one example of how that employment brand played out on billboards that are driving across the 48 states and sharing what does it feel like to be part of this organization. And over time, this kind of authentic message, if you can see that, it says celebrating faith and family. That's the innocent archetype really and strongly coming across through the messaging about what's most important at Nussbaum Transportation. And over time, this kind of authentic message really helped the company to attract people who were a good match for their culture. And they have more than doubled the size of their fleet. They have also been able to maintain their drivers once they come in. So the retention rates are quite high. And they have got a turnover rate that is enviable, sitting just under 30%. And this is year over year. They continue to achieve this kind of success and be recognized as a best fleet to drive for. This is all due to a really intense understanding and focus on their organizational culture. Okay, so now once you achieve some level of success with that, the next step is, just like money, to sustain it. You don't want that progress that you've made to slip. You want to begin to build on it and have it grow deeper into your organization and the outcomes that you can achieve. So today, the meaningful and lasting change that employees are looking for are really diving deeper into social issues as well. So it's not the time to stop. So if we're working on sustaining it, let's take a look at a company that has driven their culture profile deeper into their organization. So in this example, a technology company is able to break down into specific desirable behaviors what that culture profile is doing in the organization. And they're able to really come up with concrete statements that it's easy to identify with and makes it easy for people to understand, am I actually achieving this behavior? It also makes it easier for people to recognize when their colleagues are aligned with the cultural cornerstones. I love this one. Take extreme ownership. That culture cornerstone aligns with the hero archetype, and that's how a hero would behave. So think and act like an owner. Have the attitude of any company problem is my problem. Respond with yes, if, rather than no, because. So that kind of clarity around the culture helps people really align their behaviors and recognize when their colleagues are acting in the way that's accepted and expected as part of this culture. And that goes way deeper than we have beer in the kitchen. So one thing that you're able to do when you've got that kind of clarity is, reward people against it and drive a recognition program where peers are able to put their hand up and recognize how people are really achieving success and supporting their colleagues through those cultural cornerstones. And it's also clear when violations of these norms come up, because it's really clear to see where people are starting to run alongside them instead of with them. Some of the most important ways that we need to have our cultures align today are around sustainability issues, including new ideas about inclusion, having multiple generations with different perspectives in the workplace, and today working with remote teams. To be effective, you're going to really rely on new ways of thinking and working together. So no one size fits all generations in the workplace, or DEI training that gets delivered on Zoom where we can check that box is really going to drive the outcomes we're looking for here. We might be able to tell the board we have taken the initiative, but on the other side, the employees are not going to be able to really point to sustainable results that you've been able to achieve. Okay, so lastly, we need to share it. And in our always on world, there are lots of different ways that we can share it today. And that also leads to attention spans that have to shift, because the amount of information we're expected to take in has just grown exponentially. So that means that the language and the tools that we adopt to lead our cultures and our teams need to have something of a sticky factor, something that makes it easy to remember and kind of fun to share. Things that open conversation and get people connecting with one another. Really things that are Instagrammable. So that's why I'm a big fan of developing a visual system around the culture and having ways that make it easy to have bite-sized content and graphics that people can share out very easily across social platforms as appropriate to support your culture and your organization. It's great if you got things that are Instagrammable. Also great if this framework is based in story. It's a fact that our brains are actually wired for story. And so a system and a framework that enables us to get those gears turning in our brain. This is actually true that neuroscience has found that when you read a list of bullets, your brain kind of goes flat, but it really comes to life, and we add a lot of color and unique perspective when we use story, because stories get imprinted and we're able to recall them, and that makes them a lot more shareable. They also help us to communicate with one another much more quickly. So story is a shortcut.
I just want to add, it's not on this slide, but there is new research as well that shows that our hearts are also wired for story, and that in fact, our vital signs we start to, get in sync with other people when we're listening to the same story. So kind of fascinating.
And when we can create that kind of connection between people, where our hearts and our minds are aligned, it really allows people to connect with people more cohesively and be more vulnerable and be more willing and open to share how they are alike, which is what we see in the center of this diagram, and where they may have inherent things that create conflict for them. And so openness, willingness to share, and the ability to become vulnerable are really all part of a sticky framework that allows us to connect more effectively. So those are the 5 steps to make culture more tangible. Just like money, we need to frame it, measure it, scale it, sustain it, and share it. And we need a language to talk about that allows us to do all of those things. I think that one of the problems that people encounter these days is when they try to go straight from that fishbowl, when somebody says it's your job, you talk about culture, to Instagram and put out messages, and they don't have anything to work with. And so getting clear on the culture and being able to frame it out in a really tangible way gives you something that's sustainable and will hold you over and become a tool that can really drive results to the bottom line.
So 5 steps, and step 5 is sharing. And speaking of sharing, Teresa and I have been doing this work with archetypes back in our branding agency for quite a few years. And it's become a passion and a mission for us to really bring the incredible potential of this kind of model into organizations, right? So how do you make those complex challenges easier when the culture becomes tangible? And Teresa shared, all different ways that we can scale, to build individuals, teams, and organizations, and to bridge those 3 together. And so as we're here to share this work in the world, first of all, I would invite Courtney to keep an eye on any questions that come through, and just feel free to break in and stop us for some questions. But what we would like to do is we would like to share with you just like a high level overview of the Culture Talk platform and system, and how we're getting it out there, and how you could become part of the work that we're doing, the programs that we have in place for that. So first of all, we've referenced a couple different times the fact that there are 2 surveys that are part of the Culture Talk system. These surveys are really foundational to the work. In individuals, they measure personality against archetypes. So what are your top personal stories, right? Who are you? Who am I? And the second assessment, Culture Talk for Organizations, measures that shared experience of culture. Who are we? when we all get together. And one of the things that I think is proving out to be very, make this a very applicable system is that we're using that same 12 archetype framework. And we are able to give people a very integrated view of how does who I am relate to who we are and who all of us are in the organizations. And we can, guide all sorts of projects and initiatives using those same 12 patterns. Also, as part of Culture Talk, we have built a whole tech platform that allows our users to go in and really make sense of the results that they're getting. So they can go in, for example, an individual manager who's running a team can compare like who's on the team and what are their archetypal profiles. And they can use that foundation as a way of enhancing collaboration and a way of resolving conflict, a way of engaging people on the team, building trust and vulnerability, for example. We also have consultants and coaches that use this platform to help their clients manage different organizational workplace challenges. Side by side with that dashboard, we have built a fully loaded learning platform where the work we've been doing over the past 15 to 20 years has been translated into on-demand courses, facilitation tools, all kinds of learning resources. So downloadable PDFs to help people, who are using the work, learn, grow, develop, team, shift, lift, all of those great things. And that is all part. So it's the surveys, the dashboard, and the learning management system. So far in getting this work out there and sharing it, we have started to build an international community of users. This would be people that, again, are consultants, coaches, or they may head up an in-house learning and development team. But we now have people from 15 different countries who are using this system with their large corporate clients. So if you chose to join us in this journey, this is the community that you would step into.
Cynthia?
And, yes, go
Cynthia,
ahead.
there's a question about sharing a bit more information about the platform that stores the team results.
Yes.
Do they get a team account to share all the surveys in one place? That's the question.
Yes, and I'll add a little bit more detail to that. We are in the process of upgrading that dashboard so that you can assign different user levels into an account. So there might, for example, be one L&D leader or one consultant that has multiple clients, either in or within one organization or multiple organizations. And so they can set up through that dashboard, individuals, they can set up teams, and they can set up entire organizations in order to sift through data, track, who's completed surveys, what the scoring is looking like at any particular time, and then to have on record as well. We've seen organizations take this into, for example, a larger organization through one department that then gets built out over time and it continues to add, to our understanding of the culture at an organization.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, and I'll just add, because we're on a slide where you can sort of see some of the feedback that we hear from people who are using this system. One thing Teresa mentioned is culture shift, culture change. We are seeing people start to come back and do second and third year surveys to understand how things are shifting. They might be building some kind of culture shift strategy through a baseline culture audit. And then over time, they're going back in to say, is it working? Are the strategies and the things we're doing actually moving us in the direction we want to go? Teresa, anything to add on this slide?
No, I know there's a lot to read here. And I think what's interesting is each one of these partners represents diverse use cases and are using, as you mentioned earlier, some of them are using the system internally as part of an internal L&D team, and some people are acting in that role, but coming in as a consultant, so that we see success with both from both of those perspectives.
Awesome. So the invitation for you is that if you hear about these 5 steps of how we are making culture tangible with these tools, and you feel like, wow, I want to get my hands on this and I want to become part of that community, we do have a certification program. As a matter of fact, Courtney, who's fielding any questions, is one of our certified partners at Culture Talk. There are several people at the company she's with, Articulate, Real, and Clear, that do communications coaching that have come through certification. We have 2 sessions that start next Tuesday, April 5th.
1 week from today, right?
1 week from today. And those sessions, just so you know how the program works, they're run via Zoom videos. We have a cohort of people that come together in the A session and a different cohort that come together in the B session. And that's so that we can reach people in different time zones. But the program itself runs for 8 Tuesdays in a row. Each of the sessions is 2.5 hours. 2 hours via Zoom. And when you register for the program, you actually get, access to that learning management system. You get a very robust training manual that comes with that. You get access to one of our online courses called an Intro to Archetypes to get your feet wet and start to understand what that's about. And as we bring people through the program, one of the things that's really, really important to us is that you get up and running quickly and that you get successful right away. You get your first clients in-house or, external clients going and rolling with the system and these ideas. And so we actually have a 3-month launch package that we offer to get newly certified partners up and running and out the door with the system. So those are the things that are part of Culture Talk certification. So if we have piqued your interest, we would love to hear from you. Here is Teresa's email address, teresa@culturetalk.com. And Courtney, did you pop into the chat Teresa's calendar link as well?
Yes, I've done that several times. So
okay,
it's there.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, so the easiest way to get started, even if you're curious, even if this is not April 5th, but sometime soon, I'm curious, I want to learn more. Hop on a call with Teresa. If you're already connected with me and you want to message me, I'm happy to hop on a call with you as well. We're happy to share a Culture Talk for Individual survey with you so you can feel the system, have some personal experience with it. And yeah, we'd love to hear from you. And we really appreciate you joining us for the Make Culture Work webinar. If you enjoyed these ideas about, some of the similarities between our finances and the potential of our culture, we would so appreciate it if you'd share it out, shout it out, share this video, introduce us to people who might have a need for bringing this kind of work into their business. So with that, we are done, and I will stop my share, which I think will bring Teresa and I into the screen, hopefully. Not too many screens. And Courtney, anything we should address here at the end?
I don't think so at this moment. No other questions.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for spending an hour with us today. We appreciate getting a chance to share these ideas with you. And we look forward to connecting with you at some point.
Have a beautiful rest of your day.